And just like that, we're ready to go.
Woo.
Ahead of schedule, ahead of schedule. If the counter means anything, right?
Yeah, I find it interesting that you're not blaming our delay on me.
We're not waiting on you today, huh?
For anyone who might watch this video,
This is Nia.
Hi, Nia. It's Jennifer.
I only recently discovered that anytime there's a delay in our weekly stream, John has an automatic notice that goes up on the channel that talks about how we're just waiting on me.
Yeah.
I will only say this, that has at least one time not been true.
At least once.
At least once.
And it's mostly on streams when you're not here.
Hey, is it? Do you still have that shit?
It's the same macro, I guess.
Okay.
And so I have to like make a new timer or something and name it something. I don't know. I'm still learning all this OBS crap.
Same script. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. But yeah, there's times when I'm just like streaming by myself and I'm scurrying to get everything together, and I look up and it says waiting on Pauly B, and I have to acknowledge that this is not Paul's fault.
Oh, do you say that?
I do. I own up.
That's very kind of you.
The guy that's not even here, it's not his fault, in case y'all wondered.
And
I don't pay for Spotify, so pause that commercial there.
Because Discover automatically.
Oh no, it's still cooking.
I am letting people on Blue Sky know to join us.
Oh, that's nice. I've got to be better about the social media aspect of things.
We are tackling yoga fails tonight, correct?
That is the idea. Whether they're yoga is to be determined. That's right. I have to give you. I got to complain at you.
Let's hear it.
There's not I did not find a bevy of yoga fails. Gym fails is a much more saturated in the YouTube sphere. I think I found maybe 2 actual compilations, but I feel like I had to like go through a bunch of thirst traps to find any.
Oh yeah.
The one short that is burned into my image or my mind is this lady. I don't know. I was telling my wife, I was like, I don't know about this was health and fitness, but she had her plastic boobies with the very tight shirt that was seemingly held on with either double-sided tape or just the edge of the nipple. And she's leaning back, doing, I don't know, trying to reach back for her heels or something, and then pauses at the pinnacle, and that's when the short ends. As Paul furiously looks in YouTube to find this. Might just be my algorithm.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know what you're watching. Eckhart Yoga bloopers. Huh.
Maybe if I looked up bloopers, but I just looked up fails and I found one which was one person's personal practice, so to speak. Not practice, but their own video logs and their compilations.
So, okay. Okay. Well, there are a number of them.
You found some out there?
Okay. Yeah, they're all like 3 and 4 minutes long though.
Yeah.
So look, I'm going to say this for anybody that might be joining.
Thank you.
Yoga is a complicated kind of endeavor. The thing that is a often held misconception or a popular misconception is that among non-yoga practitioners is that it's all about oceans and butterflies, and that the people who practice it are mainly sustaining themselves nutritionally on air and energy crystals. And that's not always the case. It's not even mostly the case. Now, that being said, there is a lot of traditional devotion to yoga. One of the things that is beneficial about weightlifting is that the science of weightlifting and what provides muscle stimulus versus stagnation in progress is that those things have been studied and trialed and tested a lot over a long period of time. I mean, from the earliest days of like the Olympics, there's been a lot, and I'm talking like ancient Greece, right? So there's been a lot of progress and modernity applied to the study of resistance and cardiovascular.
What do you mean by modernity?
What's that?
Modernity.
Modernity as new and better metrics,
like a modernization, so to speak. Or,
become available for the measurement of effect, right? Then long held foundations get re-examined. And that's one of the great things about scientific study. For instance, way back when people, you got sick and somebody go, "Oh, you got ghosts in your blood. We need to drain that."
Right.
And then as things went on and people tested various theories and hypotheses, then that was found to be applicable in far fewer cases than it was applied.
Right.
Now, the thing about yoga and with any fixed knowledge is that when it is not re-examined, as John inspires nausea in his camera. The thing about any fixed knowledge is when it is not challenged by the community that practices it, there's no room for evolution of like mindsets or growth or whatever. I mean, that happens in all things that equal progress, like laws, right? I mean, for context, there used to be no domestic abuse or child abuse laws.
Right.
And now there are. There used to be no animal abuse laws, and now there are. Modernity and
you used to be able to not own property, right? Like the king owned it all.
What's that?
The king owned it all, right?
Right. Yeah. And furthermore, like the king and any kind of church owned all of the knowledge, right? But microbiology used to not be a thing, and now it is. Well, the problem that a lot of people have is that much of the yoga knowledge that exists in the circles that it exists in is uncontested, or by its own account uncontestable, and all that's fine, right? But if it's uncontested and if it's unchallengeable, tyrannical authority, then what you have there is the incapability of a system to deal with new experiences and new revelations. And so that's where a lot of the conflict between people in the yoga world and people in the non-yoga world is, and it is not because medical or exercise science proves that yoga is dismissible. It is simply saying that some of the some of the traditional positions are either detrimental or modifiable. And people don't often meet that kindly.
Right.
So when you say something like for instance, in yoga, there's a pose called down dog, where hands are on the floor, feet are on the floor, and hips are up in the air, so you're forming kind of a pyramid. Now, in traditional yoga, we're often taught that you need to have your head positioned in a certain way so that you're looking at your navel, and that your shoulders need to be up next to your ears. Your legs need to be straight, and feet need to be flat. And that puts people into kind of compromising positions. And so, for instance, whenever we John's about to demonstrate down dog for us. So in a traditional sense, when we look at down dog, as John's about to demo, when we look at down dog, you'll see people that will get themselves into non-optimal circumstances just for the achievement of the aesthetic of a pose, or how it's been traditionally taught. Now, there are some factors of genetics that come into play here, and we'll discuss those in a second. But for right now, traditionally, yoga is taught where your feet are flat, And you can see here how John's shoulder, well, you can't see it from this angle, but how his shoulder, his elbows are locked and the pointy parts of his elbows are facing away from each other. So yeah, pointy parts of his elbows are facing away from each other. And take your hands closer together, John. No, closer together in the middle. There you go. And lock your arms out. No. Take them further away. There you go. Yeah, that's it. There you go. So this is an approximation, right? And so we're often taught that this is what needs to happen. The challenge here, though, go ahead and come on out of that. The challenge here, though, is that produces skeletal load bearing. That more than not, the weight distribution or the propagation of your weight is relying on locked joints with very little muscular activation. So your joints are no longer protected, and it's just skeletal load bearing. Now there are instances where skeletal load bearing helps improves the strength and resiliency of your skeleton, but in this case, when you are relying on connective tissue solely for load bearing, then it's not great. Now here we have a different version of down dog that we're going to go into, where John is going to demonstrate by, you all right? Okay. Going to go into by taking his hands just a little wider than shoulder width and rotate just a little wider, not much. That's way wider. So take him a little closer, right above, just a smidge closer still. All right, good. And then he's going to rotate his index fingers outside of parallel, just a bit. Now, when he goes into this, he's going to bend. Now, once he does that, you'll notice that his elbows naturally turn in toward the space behind him. And then when he goes to lift up like into a plank, this is an ideal setup for a push-up, or in yoga, as they call it, chaturanga. Then whenever you go back into down dog, you can see here how his elbows naturally bend. And especially if he's pressing through the knuckle portions of his palm, then this becomes a muscular strength building position or pose. If you turn to the side for us, John. Now, once he goes into that, the beautiful thing here that happens is as long as those alignments of the skeleton of the hands and arms are correct, then we become functionally limited in our ranges and our expressions. Nothing, unless he breaks form and breaks alignment, nothing is going to allow him to move into an unsafe range of motion. And as you can see here, he has to come out of it every couple of seconds, right? Because it's fucking exhausting. Now, when you're going in, thank you very much for that demo, John, and I'm going to give you a round of applause from the internet community. Now, when you're going into that, the idea there is to consistently and sustainably over a long period of time, meaning not hours, I'm talking about like weeks and months, develop greater expressions of those ranges of motion. So you're stronger in a broader range of motion. And that's what we're after. That's what the whole thing is.
Fucking roasted after my workout. Worked out earlier.
Oh, okay.
And one of my things that I work on all the time is overhead pullovers. Which is a lot of that same shit that was just there.
Yeah.
And then pull-ups as well is a very similar thing to me in down dog. So yes, that was exhausting.
Gotcha. So what we are looking at there is a devotion to a system that was developed and in many schools of yoga unchanged. Like it's still taught like in traditional forms and with traditional aspects, with traditional alignments. Now, when you have a geographical, section of a geographical portion, geographically concentrated portion of people who all share similar characteristics, meaning like the distance from their ankle, like no one is really above a certain height or below a certain height.
Right.
The distance from their ankle to their knee is all pretty similar among males or females or whatever.
Mhm.
It's all relatable.
Well, it's like I remember it reminds me of when I was younger, we went on a field trip to some colonial era house somewhere. And this is spanning like time generations, but I think it speaks to this point though. When we were walking through this house, we were probably middle school. And we felt like giants in this house.
Yeah. Right.
Like the stairwell was like at the mid thigh, and doorways were just felt shorter. And the thing was just at that time of the world, people are just shorter.
Right. Yeah. And so, and that has a lot to do with the nutritional component as well. Right.
Absolutely.
So when you have these people that are similar because of whatever circumstances, it is broadly applicable to say, oh, do this. And it's, even if it's not beneficial, at least it's not harmful. Or you have a certain population that has more pliability because of X, Y, or Z, like more pliability or more elasticity in their joints. But people from another geographic location may not have that. And so to say that these things are unchallengeable, regardless of who is practicing them, we can see where it starts to get a little murky, right? A little muddy.
Well, and I think too, not to get too far into the weeds on this, is there is a religion and a spiritual component to yoga, right? And it's foundational elements of it, I feel. And it's like within Hinduism and things of that nature.
Sure. Yeah. With some, in some aspects.
And so I feel like to some degree, right, when there's some of that involved, right, it's hard sometimes to separate or to want to move away from some of those things, because then it feels like potentially we're altering beliefs or altering the intention of what those movements and things are. But I think to your point, though, you can still have the spiritual aspect and then start applying some science-based evidence around those to how, from the body standpoint, it can become more effective and more efficient, thus really helping benefit the spiritual aspects of these things. Because at the end of it, right, it's about connecting the mind and the body and helping, again, even if you just look at it from a spiritual place, the way to kind of mentally unload. You're doing things that help keep your joints healthy and help challenge the muscles and full ranges of motion and cooperative ranges of motion. You're going to build all of that together. One of the things I kind of felt made me think about too is I feel a lot of time is people think of yoga as like they need to stretch. And that kind of, I feel, is a little bit of a misnomer of it, right? Or we think as stretching as this way that we use to kind of heal ourselves. And so we don't always understand necessarily what we're looking for or what we're saying when we say I need some yoga or I need to go to yoga. It's what's the why? Why do you need to go to the yoga? Why do you feel you need to stretch? Because a lot of times I find, and I was thinking about this today, is, a lot of times people have physical therapy, or if you look for online for corrective exercises of something to some ailment, they'll give you these kind of big, broad motions maybe. I always think to myself, like 80% of that's not really needed. Right? And it's not bad. It's just 80% of your ranges of motion, you're excellent and fine, and you don't really need to work on. It's that maybe that 10 or 20% that's causing you issues. However, from a very generalist standpoint, if you can brush up onto I always call it the pain cave, but if you can just go up and brush up to the pain cave, not go into it and deep into it, but you just kind of find these boundaries and you just slowly, like a lapping stone, just slowly kind of make these laps around with your shoulder or squats or things, you could eventually start clearing out some of those issues if you're paying really close attention to how you're moving and you're keeping it very simple and not overloading. And I think that's kind of how, and with yoga too, because we're doing a lot of general, low intensity, broad spectrum, let's call it broad spectrum antibiotics for pain, right? is these motions help hit different spots of where we're weak, and it challenges in those weak positions. And the better we can get at that, right, we can really we no longer have to take an hour-long yoga class to get rid of shoulder pain. We can maybe spend 5-10 minutes doing a few correctives, or we can spend a few minutes, learning how to move our shoulder in a better manner, and will give us those benefits as well. So, it's just kind of the different things bouncing through my head when we.
Well, all of that's true, right? And so it's kind of like one of those things where, like, let's say you go into a yoga class for shoulder pain, and if your yoga instructor or whoever's teaching the class isn't versed in shoulder anatomy, they might teach a very beneficial generalized class for people who are not really suffering from any aches or pains. But if they have a systematic devotion to the expression of certain poses like down dog, you have the potential to cause more injury than you do benefit. And that's where things get kind of murky. Now, in previous episodes or previous videos, we've talked about how an exercise is no longer really viable, and it doesn't matter what it is. Right. And this is not rebuking or labeling an overall belief system or anything like that. An exercise, an expression is no longer valid or should be re-examined or abandoned if there are other and better ways to get it done, if it has the potential for injury, right? Or it is just no longer applicable in modern, or in the environment in which the practitioner or user experiences their life, right? So let me give an example. In modern society, and I'm about to call up this video that I have queued up about how to do plow pose. Now, plow pose is I will sit
die on that hill.
I will die on that hill. I will sit in the debate chair all day long with anyone who wants it. Plow pose is only applicable beneficially to like 1% of 0.1% of any of the yoga practicing population. 1% of 0.1%.
Yeah.
Here's the reason. Whatever used to occur in society thousands of years ago, when this pose was first developed, it is not the same. Things are not the same. Now what we have are people who increasingly have what they call it like bookworm neck or something. It's like where you don't have a curve in your cervical spine.
Or tech neck, geek neck.
Yeah. Where
straight neck.
You should have a curve that goes like so. What ends up happening is your spine is kind of situated like this, right? And
you actually your one's spine can actually start fusing.
Oh,
a buddy of mine, he's a good friend of mine. He's a chiropractor, and he's been working with small children. He used to work with small kids, and they do X-rays before they do any adjustments on any patients, but especially small children. And he was saying he was seeing even 9 and 10-year-olds coming in with straight neck or tech neck. And then if you have it long enough, the analogy we've talked about before is like that bowling ball on a stick, right? You have this big massive object on a little tiny stick. Envision that's our head. And so with our head knocking forward, I don't know, moderator deleted it. Head jutting forward, you get that big straight neck, and now you have exponential more weight on your spine. And these small muscles, aren't really designed, so to speak, for those kind of efforts. And so the brain, those muscles are more for articulation, not so much for carrying and doing a lot of weight bearing. And so the body starts laying bone down in our vertebra to help support, to keep the disc in place, and to help keep to keep you alive, right? And you get basically it can get to a point where you can no longer articulate and create that spinal flexion.
Okay. So I'd have to read up on some paper on that to be able to comment on that effectively. But I can tell you, like, just from a muscular standpoint, it's all, I mean, it equals eventually the same thing.
Right.
Basically, away and aside from it all, what has developed is that we spend more and more time as we spend more and more time devoted to device-oriented lives, right? And that could be at a computer, it can be on a phone or on a tablet or whatever else, right? But as we spend more time of our lives positioned in certain ways that are indicative of the technology and things that we use, and there's no denying that life in general is becoming more streamlined that way.
Well, I always tell clients, you know what? No matter what, we are anterior creatures. Like your food hole,
right?
you put all your food in your face. Your eyes are on the front of your face. We reach in front of it. If you look at the way the spine bends, we have much more what's considered flexion, that bending forward, much more access there than any type of extension or the bending back.
Oh yeah,
you can't
I mean,
try to reach behind you.
Degrees this way, yeah.
You can't, right?
So
we're just going to naturally get pulled this way.
And then as we have devices and our lives become more tech centric, and this kind of slouched posture becomes more and more common. I'll give you an example of something else. Any client that I have that I work with who is like under 35, whenever they are standing with their hands at their sides, there is a decided action where their hand, when their hand is laying down by their side, where this is what's present, is an angle like this. Where when you meet with someone who is like over 35, it's kind of it, but as a person currently is older than 35, the closer you get to 40 and 50 and whatever.
February 18th, 2025 of our Lord.
So whenever you get to someone who's older now, you'll see less of this and more of this angle present. And that has everything to do with how often we're holding a phone in our hand, right? And so this angle is present. And so people's hands are often like this, down by their sides. So if we're going to go and do some kind of an exercise where, like, I'm swinging a hammer, for instance, I need very little training to get my hand in that position. Maybe the strength to hold the hammer, but as far as like being able to express my hand in that position, I'm not going to require that much acclimation. Now in plow pose, this is a tutorial and it's only a minute long on how to do plow pose. And we're going to go through this. And we're going to talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
All right. So let me go over here and adjust so that we can see the playback speed is going to be
half.
Let's do it. Yeah, half. So we'll go ahead and press play here. And we can see here, first of all, that this person is laying on her back. I apologize for assuming gender. But she's laying on her back. I want to point out some things. Let's go back to this. Actually, look, see this angle I'm talking about right here? In this person's hands. Okay, so she's laying on her back. Chin is, her neck, you can see is almost flat on the ground. We can tell that as indicated by the proximity of her chin to her chest. So if we go ahead and play, setting up for plow pose, and this is narrated, but I'm not going to turn on the captions because I don't want to block out the view of the execution of the pose. Now, I want to also look at something else here. As this person is going into this, you can actually see here how her shoulders are lifted up off the ground, right? So she already has this anterior tilt. I'm not shitting on anybody here. I'm just saying that this is a
observations.
This is a common thing, and all we're doing is observing passive posture. So we can have a safe bet that this is a person who has a slight slouch. A lot of people do. Not shitting on this person at all. I'm only calling into mind the predispositions that this person has and the pose that they are about to execute. No shade to this person or to the creator of this video. The intentions here are good. So without further ado, all right, so she's going to get set up here and she bring the knees over the chest, and we can see here how starts off kind of okay. And quite honestly, if you were to stay kind of maybe in like this position, even then it's not great, but it's not absolutely wretched either. We can see that most of the load bearing is going to still be here down into the kind of elbows, right? Abs are going to be very active here. Glutes are going to be active because of trying to hold the legs up. Not optimal, but not completely just fucking horrible. All right. Let's go ahead. So now we come into this, and then we can see that the weight is going down over the shoulders. Now, right now in this, chin is coming really close to the chest. And whereas the shoulders should be doing the load bearing, you can see here that her shoulders are not on the floor. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's because of, like John was just demonstrating, this anterior tilt in the shoulders at, you know, like at her as her kind of default posture. Now, as we're looking at this, the weight then is pretty well centered between her elbows and the back of her head. Lots and lots of stretch to the back of the neck right now, but it's also load bearing in a really, really lengthened position. And as the weight goes overhead, there'll be a portion of this wherein all of her body weight is being supported by her neck until her legs touch down. So let's go ahead and roll this again. She's adjusting here. Now, she's holding this, not so bad. Now, this point at which the knees come down and the feet stay over the knees, everything is forward of her shoulders. She's still supporting herself with her hands, as we can see here, but this load bearing is starting to increasingly go toward the front of her body. And then she's going to extend those legs out. And then there we go. Now,
you know what this reminds me of? In jiu-jitsu, there's a maneuver or a submission I think is illegal or just can get you disqualified in many lower level tournaments, I would say, called a can opener, where you quite literally you sit on somebody's chest and you just grab them by the back of the head, I think, right? And you just pull their chin into their you pull the back of their head into this kind of a position. Right. And it's disqualified. It's a disqualifying move because of how serious of an injury can be created for somebody.
Yeah, for the displacement potential.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Serious risk of displacement here for the cervical vertebrae. Okay, so let's continue to watch, and we'll see here how the goal is to lengthen in the legs. All of the load bearing is born here through the back of the head. The hands are even serving to push the hips just a little further this way. Let's go ahead and kick this up in normal speed. Okay. How to do plow pose? Breathe into any tension in the hamstrings. Gape at the navel and protect your neck by not turning your head. Let's go back to that for just a moment. Lift the kneecaps to engage the leg muscles. Press out through the bottoms of the feet. Plug the toes into the mat. Activate the arm muscles. And press firmly into the mat with flat hands. If you're pressing, that means that you're trying to sustain this. That is not load bearing because all of your mass is over here.
Right.
Like
you may be contracting into the muscle, but the muscle's really not having a whole lot to. There's more some isostatic squeeze, so to speak.
Right. Now, if we're going back into this, and let's take this into. So you see here how she's sitting here, and it talks about now right here, with those feet lifted. And if we're talking about how slowly, and this is normal speed, and you can see here how that how slowly those feet are lifted. Now there may be, now at this point, since her hips are starting to go behind the shoulders, a lot of that weight is in her hands, right? But from this portion to that portion, as the feet are moving, as the hips are moving back, all of that load bearing is in the back of her neck for a portion of that. Not all of it, admittedly, but for a portion of it. Her body weight load bearing is in the back of her neck. And you could say, well, you know, the load bearing, I mean, a lot of that's going down through the shoulders, but her shoulders are not on the floor. It's distributed between her hands and the back of her neck. And also, whenever she's going to lift that, now there is a case to be made for that. It's mitigated because of the arrangement of the spine and how the spine is sitting behind the shoulders, whereas the hips are sitting over the shoulders. So some of that mass is over here versus over there. So I challenge you to do this. We're going to guess at this person's weight in pounds, and I'm going to say, what are you going to guess there, John? Maybe 135?
Yeah, I was saying like 120, 130.
Right. Okay. 130.
Don't want to get shot across the internet for.
Right. So I would like for anyone to imagine, don't conduct this test. Don't do it. I want you to imagine that you are taking like a 30-pound or a 50-pound weight, right? And leaning over and hanging that weight from the back of your head and try and sustain that. It's not safe, and it certainly won't be comfortable. Anyway, that's plow pose. We can see here as she's going into this how a portion of that is borne up through the head, and then once it transfers into the arms and shoulders, we have another issue, is that this body weight is now being borne into the back of the shoulder and in the arms with hands that are rotated in such a way as to be minimally effectively recruited.
Yep.
Right? We could even forgive this portion of it if her hands were merely turned upward and her like into fists, and her fists were pressing down. That would be better. Right? We can see how that, like, we could. Because
this is like what I guess some tricep activation. You're not getting much lat, I don't think. I mean, you get some lat, but it's not going to be really too effective at that point.
Not really. What you're really relying on primarily is the ability to press down through the backs of your.
It's more of maybe some stabilization left or right is really what you're gaining more than anything, and you're just trying to keep everything in that. It's like a bicycle, right? As soon as you ride, if you're crappy on a bicycle, the faster you ride, the better you are. Because that force, everything stays in the middle. But as soon as, if you're a crappy bicycle rider and you don't have good balance, you start going too slow, then we start getting that weeble wobble, and that's when we fall. So in this kind of compare the analogy to complete the analogy, as long as she's kind of staying in that center of her bony structures, whether it be the spine and the shoulder girdle, the hands really don't have to do a whole lot, but she starts getting too far too fast outside of that very narrow scope, and then you're going to have a lot of muscular effort to try to keep you there. And because of that position, you just don't have much strength, and falling over is pretty much inevitable, I feel. Yeah. For the uninitiated or someone that's getting into that for the first time, especially. I mean, again, I think I keep bringing me back into jiu-jitsu practice with this, because we do a lot of rolling and you're having to kind of move in kind of awkward positions. And there's times that as we participate, we have to roll backwards, or we're having to, again, contort ourselves in a manner, but anytime we roll backwards, it's always to a side, right? It's never straight back. It's not just because I have a ponytail, like a shaved head, dude. You don't want to roll backwards, because again, you'll either hit your head as a stop, which really sucks. And if you've ever, I've had that kind of happen on accident when we're practicing rolls, and you try to roll backwards similar to that plow pose, and if you hit your head back, you can get, it sucks in the neck. You'll maybe feel it in the back somewhere, even depending on how fast and how quick it goes, and that sudden elongation through the system. So, I mean, it's just like you're saying, where would this be beneficial, or how could this be benefit? I could see if you were looking at, like, maybe if you're a stargazer and you were a professional stargazer, I could see that
or
be
a mechanic, right?
a mechanic working up, but
right.
But that would be, again, you're having to devote some serious time to that and almost nothing else, right? It'd be, you're constantly looking up. And then again, to your point too, some sort of external rotation of the shoulder is very likely. Now that could be maybe slightly overlooked as far, again, like you said, we can rotate the palms up and that alleviates some of that, or at least thumbs up a neutral grip.
Yeah.
But the whole extreme flexion of the spine, rolling ourselves up in that manner, what is it buying us, and what's it going to help us? Even if you're trying to gently activate into your neck into those positions as a resistance, not just be passive where you're trying to put tension into that and create strength under tension. Again, there's better ways and safer ways. Like, you could just do that with your hands. You could bring your chin to your neck, and you could put your hands behind your head, and you could gently just put weight with your hands. I wouldn't crank on it, but if you wanted to do a similar thing, that would be a hell of a lot safer, and you'd still get the effect, I would feel.
Yeah, I mean, even more to the point, like, you could raise yourself, you could put a couple of, like, a pillow behind you, right? Lay flat on your back, and just press into that. That would help it. Here's one of the biggest challenges with the flexibility that comes along with yoga. There's nothing wrong with flexibility. There's nothing fucking wrong with yoga, right? Yoga is fucking awesome, and being flexible is fucking awesome. The challenge here comes in whenever you condition your muscles to only be in lengthened positions passively.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what occurs when we have imbalanced agreements. Like when you kind of do this all the time, like we've been saying, right? These muscles are passively short. These muscles are passively long. And then when we have a demand outside of that, it becomes painful. If I'm going to lift my head up and I'm like, I really don't want to do any stargazing because it just hurts my neck or whatever. Right. We have these things that we apply, these effects that we apply to circumstance. Not to issues, overriding issues, right? Now, if you're going to go through your life, full candor, if you're going to go through your life and never really needing to express strength, that's fine. Unfortunately, that's not the way life is.
And, I mean, one of my clients, and you probably have similar of them, but she's about to turn 60, I think, this summer. She's trying to get to 50 countries before she turns 60.
That's awesome.
I know, right? But you look at her, she's very unassuming, but she just knows she needs to work out. She's got it. She just has to work.
I think I've met with this woman.
Maybe you met her at the gym, but we've not.
No, I think didn't anyway. You sent one person to me who was traveling.
No, that was a different client.
Oh, okay.
But
all right, go ahead.
But a similar sense and she's an engineer. She's not going out to, win any competitions. She's not trying to do anything. She likes art and she likes cultural things. She just needs enough strength to be able to pick up her suitcase and get it on the plane and get it off the Uber and whatnot. And that's it, right? But even she recognizes she needs to do some working out. She recognizes she needs to build strength in here and there to be able to do those things at her age and to continue on. And I think it's one of those things too, we don't realize it until it's gone, right? Unfortunately, I always, even as a kid, I used to say it all the time, right? But the youth is wasted on the young.
Yep, it is. We grow too late smart and too soon old and too late smart.
Yep.
Right.
And so, and I think that's a big thing is if you can develop those little habits. And the more that if you look at the science and the literatures that are coming out, the amount of effort that you need to put into it is very minimal in the grand scheme of things. And she's actually, and you can reverse a lot of negative effects and negative health outcomes by just small changes, whether it be cardiovascular, insulin sensitivity, diabetes, kinds of things. I'm not saying you can just cure anything by exercise. However, small changes into your physical activity will have significant outcomes for you, and it doesn't take 40 hours a week.
Sustained.
It doesn't. Yes,
Sustained small
it's just
changes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so again, if you're going to do it, let's find the ways that are going to help keep you doing it for the longest.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to call to mind this one practitioner again. Now, I want to make something clear. There is no shade at all to this content creator. This person is earnest and obviously doing what they think is best, and doing a very traditionally taught practice.
I'd say it's pretty decent quality, all things considered, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't look like dog shit. It's not a quick like vaulting herself up and over. It is very controlled, very graceful. Which, if you know,
yeah, I'm gonna share this one video with that I believe this is the same person doing down dog, and this is the finished. This is a 30-minute practice, right, for strength and flexibility. So knees are locked, heels are on the floor, elbows are locked, shoulders are up next to the ears. So this now becomes, you know what, John, you might have been closer with the 120 yes.
who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Could be a big mat.
Right. Could be one of those extra long, extra wide mats. It's true. Obviously a long-term practitioner,
yes.
Right? But here in this version of down dog, we can see where she is aligned in such a way that the shoulders are locked, the elbows are locked, and the ankles are locked. Now let's look at this one more time.
Well, step it back even if you don't mind. And I was just going to call attention into the midsection, the core. And while maybe straight on it doesn't look terrible, and it probably isn't the end of the world, we can see a brevity to the midsection, especially the front side. I don't know if I have a drawing tool. Do we have a drawing tool on this one?
Yeah, we do. Let me
on your side.
That for, there you go. And
cool
go
beans. Yeah. So like if we can kind of see the seam of her shirt here, how it kind of rotates or bends. Or again, if we were to try to, I'm terrible to draw a line. Oh, they're not diminishing. They're not hiding.
Oh, I can change that. 1 second. Disappearing ink.
But in any event, right, we can just see clearly by the back, we got arch here. So therefore we're going to have a concavity here. And those are just kind of those small little cues that one can see where she's not as lengthened into the midsection as she possibly could. Which, to your point earlier, kind of talking about potential to be slouched. And this could be kind of indicative of that slouching here as well, where we're not quite in that full lengthened spine versus kind of a collapsed chest or a collapsed stomach. Where again, you're doing these practices, if you can have as much tension engaged throughout the body, conscious engagement, what's your goal? Because I'll sell it to you, right? You trying to lose weight? Well, if you're engaging more muscles, you're going to be burning more calories, brother. You're going to be building more strength. Okay, so that just means you're going to be you want hypertrophy. Okay, so hypertrophy is going to be a little hard to sell you on this one, but if you move it into a flow pattern and you're still again consciously engaging these muscles, you're going to get some development and size, maybe not so much, but you'll help yourself with longevity. So this doesn't become your all practice, but this goes into helping you with your pull-ups. This goes into helping you with your overhead presses, to where now you're not getting that little weird catch in your shoulder, or you don't feel something funky in your low back, because you've built those stabilizers and learned how to put yourself in those strong positions to be able to rep out those max reps. And even when you have to do little cheat reps, you're not compensating with the collapsed midsection now, because you've developed that strength. Mobility, I think, is pretty straightforward, right? You work on your mobility, you work on these positions, time under tension again, you'll develop and help work yourself out of those pain spots. So
now I know that the banner going across here is hiding a little bit of the image, but
yeah, it cuts me off. I forget why I had to do that, but it is what it is
okay.
right now.
That's all right. It is
next
what
time.
it is. It's okay. So as we look at this, though, I'm going to go ahead and go back and play it again. One thing I want to point out here is that being that we can see that her shoulders are turned the way they are, and you can just barely see it on the video about how her elbows are locked, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can certainly see here on the video about how her eyes are pointed toward her legs. Now, all that being said, I want you to imagine that that you are trying to lift yourself up out of something with your arms locked, right? Like maybe you're standing over a kind of a chasm or something like that, and the only way for you to pull yourself up is with your locked arms up next to your ears. You're trying to pull yourself up that way. For some point, until your elbows get forward of your head, all of that is in your shoulders. Then your pec can kind of engage and take over. But until then, it's all in your shoulders. Oh, there's a little more. Nicely done, John.
I'm trying.
So we can see here how this inward rotation of the hands points the elbows out.
Yeah.
Locks, gives you the capability to lock the elbow. And then as she's bearing into that, right? So all the stress is going into her shoulders, into her elbows, and her wrists. And so when she's going to do this next thing, which is to walk those feet forward, that load-bearing responsibility stays in the shoulders, and she'll walk it forward in just a second. And as she tries to keep those arms locked, it's all in the wrist, all in the elbows, all in the shoulders. Now, right before she finished, let's see. 1 second.
And we get done with here, I got a question to ask too.
Here, okay, right about here is where her chest starts to be able to get active as well. But while she was in down dog and until she got to this point, all of that load bearing was in her shoulders, into her elbows, and into her wrists. Go ahead.
Kind of bony structures more so versus any muscle
muscular
effort.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if this little walk-in thing, what is the benefit of keeping the knees locked versus allowing a slight bend to be able to get a more natural kind of gait versus this, what I'm seeing is this twisting motion?
Okay, so the idea there.
I mean, I get you're not coaching this, but just from your practitioner standpoint,
the idea there is to get this all of this posterior chain as recruited as possible for as long as possible, and that's really it. Whenever you go, the lower the hips go with the knees bent, the more that's going to go into the anterior structures rather than the posterior structures, and that's really it. That's the science-based answer. The yoga-based answer would be that's just how it's traditionally taught.
I gotcha.
So as we can see here, she walks it forward. Oh, and calling to mind this specific brand, which I'm not going to mention by name, does this puts these emblems on here that are highly reflective. And so if you're ever going to do a photo shoot with this shit on,
might want to choose a different brand.
Just know that you need to edit that out. Okay. She's going to go over here, feet her down. Now here's something to call to mind right here. Once she finishes this and goes into her forward bend, that is a ton of length in her hips, in her hamstrings, in her calves, in her back. To be able to have your hands with locked knees flat on the floor like that, with your elbows bent to that degree, requires a whole lot of openness through the whole posterior chain.
Very strong hip flexors, very lengthened glutes.
Very well, you just brought up the other. So the only thing that makes it possible to achieve a forward bend that is this profound is strong front of the thigh. right? You can't really achieve it without that, because you have to be able to pull this portion of the body toward this portion of the body. And the only way you can do that is with a musculature that sits right about here. The same musculature that you would use to draw a knee up to your chest as you're standing. That is the only way you can get at that. Now you can see here that this person has some obvious development in her hamstrings and some obvious development in the quads, and then some really obvious length that's capable of being expressed in the posterior chain and in the glutes. Fantastic demonstration of strength, not taking anything away from this person. Let's continue on. So once she goes into this, no, that's another thing. I challenge anyone watching this to, when you're going to go into this, to bend your knees and get your abs that flat on your thighs.
Yeah.
It will be very, very difficult to do. There's a lot of strength present here, right? Especially, like John said, in the hip flexors. All right, prepping for our next pose. Going to forward bend, and it looks like, if I'm not mistaken, we're gonna get set up here for, oh no, coming back up into forward bend. I am mistaken. I'm sorry, coming back into Tadasana. Oh no, here's where it's gonna come. All right, let's call to mind again what we were looking at earlier. Lots of development in the front of the thigh, lots of development in the back of the thigh and the glutes. I just want to say for just a second, notice that hand position that I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
We already know this person is under 35. So, okay.
Is it me, or do you feel her hips are slightly tilted forward? Or
The hips are slightly tilted forward. You can see actually how the shoulders are not sitting over the hips directly, right? And all that means is that weight is more in her toes than in her heels. Okay. So we're gonna progress here. She's gonna do a step back, I guess. So bringing a leg forward. Oh, wait. If we look at this, now I'm gonna challenge anyone watching this video. Now that was a static,
challenging a lot of people today. You challenging a lot of people today.
I sure have, and I'm fucking standing on business with it. That, and I'm only calling this to mind because of the thing that you said about a lot of strength in the hip flexors for a forward bend. This is a tremendous amount of power that it takes to lift your ankle and knee up to hip height and do it slowly.
Yep.
Like,
and not bounce or sass, twist around
right,
and all that other shit.
No wavering, no weird ass whatever. This person is focused, and that leg is just lifting up slow and with purpose. There's no yanking it up and then slinging it,
hoping it stays up there when you.
Oh shit! And then even pulled her toes back before she lowered it. Lots of length, and lots of strength. Okay, that was fucking beautifully done. I'm not even kidding. All right, here. If you're gonna go into any one of these poses, in this one, doing it really well. A couple of things. The taking the hands into an overhead prayer position is really kind of a non-beneficial thing. Honestly, if you're to take your hands if you're pressing like this, and trying to take your arms up, that's fine, but you do far better to take your hands apart and then reach the arms up, because then you're able to get a lot more length into the lat. But that's kind of picking nits. A lot of load bearing is present here. Load bearing is present here over the with the front knee, over the front heel. Great. I would say that hip, that right hip.
There's some shearing there that needs to happen, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Going into that good hamstring stretch. Just now noticed that dog. What a beautiful puppy.
Just popped in, I feel. I think he was taking a nap earlier. Yeah, so again, to my eye, looks a little like the right hip maybe rotate forward some, but again,
that right hip is, Oh, so that right hip is that left hip is reaching further forward, and that right hip is pulling it. So the hips are just a little bit askew.
But again, like you said, that's very minor and not, again, just observationals. And I guess you can kind of see that too with her heel a little bit. And she might be transitioning a little bit too. These are things I look at when I'm working with clients with lunges. Is right that this back heel, is it rotating inward, or does it seem to be staying like straight up to the sky, kind of a deal? The other thing that makes me think about it too is just this big toe placement. And again, it's just based on the angles we're looking at. It looks to be, again, like we might be having extra rotation in that right glute, so to speak, which rotates the knee wide, which would turn the heel in. Again, minor things, but if you aren't as well versed in this, you probably will experience this in a greater fashion and such, of like that heel really rotates all the way towards your center line. Or to me, it's when I used to play football in middle school, I'd be on the line and I remember I would like try to turn my foot to like get a good bite on the ground. Like I was going to do something with it or something like that. Like, let me at them. And so that's kind of what I see sometimes when people are doing lunges, is they get that big toe kind of cocked behind them and they're just pushing off that big toe joint with their foot at this angle of maybe 30, 45 degrees to the floor, kind of a deal. Whereas if you can try to rotate your foot more squarely, you'll put a lot more stretch on the front end of the quad, front end of the hip flexors more directly. You're going to be keeping your knee in a better alignment as well. We've talked about it numerous times, but the knee joint is a hinge. So it's happy when it's everything square, but we start rotating or twisting or bending, we can start creating some upsetness for our knee. And the thing I really like that she's highlighting here or showing is her heel is up. And a lot of times I see, especially with new clients, they try to do a lunge and they try to put that heel down, which also, again, leads to that toe or that foot rotating because we just don't have that much length in our calf, no matter how much you stretch or roll out your calf.
True story. The thing I want to call to mind here or note is something piggybacking off of what you said, is that with that weight being centered around the ball of that foot and around that large toe, what ends up occurring is that in order to do any kind of a press off, if this person's going to do this, both of us are seeing this video for the first time. Like, okay, wait, there's no preview for any of this. Whenever you have that kind of alignment, heel up, great. Whenever you have that kind of distribution, that kind of propagation of the load-bearing responsibility around the ball of the foot and the large toe primarily, then you put a lot of load-bearing responsibility into a specific muscle, the flexor hallucis. And rather than if you were to have the toes more centric, the weight propagated more centrically, you'd be able to press off of the soleus and off of the calf.
So we're gonna break into we're gonna break into the OnlyFans account for a second.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, let's see it. So this step back just a little.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So if you are pressing down through the entirety of the toes and your weight is distributed across the toes, then whenever you go to press off, you're with the whole calf. Right. And all of it gets recruited and you'll feel it. You'll feel the burn and all the places you feel the burn. When your heel is rotated in, and you can see John's calf there, right? When your heel, okay, yeah, giving us the back view. That's it, John. Show it. Yeah. Ooh, that's a shapely calf. Good, sir. Now, when your heel is rotated in and you go to press off, then much less of your calf gets recruited and more of your flexor hallucis becomes responsible. And you might notice that as like pain that you think is occurring in, for instance, your Achilles tendon, where the flexor hallucis travels alongside. If we're going to look at this woman again, one of the things that almost is always the case, not all the time, but almost always the case, if you see one hip in a lunge, if you just can't quite get that hip hip of the rear leg, if you can't quite get that equidistant from the space in front of you, then usually, not always, but usually that is a result of down the midline of whatever you're standing on, your feet are too close to that midline. And so you can solve a lot of that if you take the rear foot or the lead foot and move it out even an inch, in either direction, even 1 inch. And what that does is make room for your leg, the ball of the femur to turn without having to articulate oddly.
The greater trochanter.
Trochanter, that's right. Now this person obviously stepped back into that beautifully, a lot of grace in that movement, so a lot of practice with it. And maybe it exists where she's trying to work on something specific. Mm-hmm. Who knows? But that would be that would be the only note. Want to call to mind again that she has a magnificent dog. Right. Settling into that, lots and lots of strength in that back leg, load bearing.
Again, I was going to ask you about this as well. I noticed she's getting a lot of spine extension.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? And I guess that's it. What are your thoughts on that? And what advice would you give to people trying to copy, mimic, replicate, specifically again with this uprightness here?
Right. So the problem here is that if we look at this a little more closely, we can see that there. Right. Fucker. We can see here a lot of length in the front of the spine, right, and reaching down into that back leg. We can see an acute, and there's a lot of length here too, honestly, and there is an acute, almost acute bend starting here, right? And I'm not exaggerating anything. This is just me drawing a trace of what's present.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see that acute bend, which tells us, once we look at that coupled with the locked aspect of that knee, we can see here that what this means is that there is very little of the pelvic abdominals that are participating in this alignment. The better thing here to do, if you're going to protect your low back, would be to have a slight bend in this knee, and I mean even a slight one. Then you could use your pelvic abdominals to draw your hips under, so you use your pelvic abdominals to draw the hips under, feeling the rest of your abs want to participate, and your chest will want to collapse. That's where all the strength building comes in, mm-hmm. because you're fighting against that, right? Try it now. I mean, if you're in a safe place to do so and you're not driving, once you're watching this video, try it. Stand up, tuck your tailbone from your abs and see, and you're doing it correctly when you feel the rest of your abs engage and your pecs want to drop. Then keep your abs engaged and try and lift your diaphragm skyward. You will be, after you've done that, then keeping your pelvic abdominals engaged, try and arch your low back, and you'll find that that's exceedingly difficult to do.
Yeah.
It protects the low back. Now, This extension is fine if it's fluid, but in this case, it's acute. And this person's obviously strong, and obviously able to handle it well. But for a lot of people, that could result in some eventual discomfort, or maybe immediate discomfort. The better thing to do, like we were saying, would be to bend that back knee just a little, tuck the tailbone under, and get those pelvic abdominals engaged.
Okay.
Shall we continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, beautiful warrior one going into that. I mean, it's a very fluid traditional mm-hmm. expression. Here is the shit of it all. Now in plank. This is a very commonly expressed way to produce a plank pose. We'll notice that we will notice that the heels are produced forward of the toes. We'll notice that the elbows are locked, shoulders are collapsed.
Yep.
Right.
Look, you can
There's
see them traps
concavity in the
cooking
chest,
too.
so we can see that. We can see that across her back there. What's that, John?
I say you can see them traps cooking too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can see that there's a lot of extension in the pec. If you are a yoga practitioner and you do your plank this way, you'll feel a lot of activation in the anterior delt, but a lot of stretch here in the back of the neck, and you might even feel like that's beneficial. The problem being that most of us spend most of our lives that way anyway.
Right, going back into the whole plow pose argument.
Right. No, exactly. No matter what, though, those elbows are locked, and you can see that those elbows are locked for this slight kind of angle that's present here.
It's hyperextending.
The elbows, right, hyperextension. With the heels pushed forward like that, more of your weight is going to tend into the upper body, like chest and above. The further back you push the heels, the more your weight will go into the abs. Now, I do want to call something to mind here with this young woman. That is a lot of ab strength. She's got a lot of ab strength going on right there. Like, there is no lack of abdominal strength being expressed there. And the pelvic abdominal activation that we were talking about earlier, you can see here how this area is abbreviated and this area is extended. I would have liked to have seen that more expressed in her lunge.
Right.
That's the whole thing that we were talking about. As you can see here, the camera's not a different angle. Nothing's changed, right? Except the relativity of her hips from the recruitment of her abs. And you can see here how you don't see one hip any more than the other.
Right.
That's
one of those things I'm always like when I'm working with clients, I'm always walking around and I look from one side and I walk around to the other side. I'm like,
yeah.
What's going on with your hips? What's going on with your fucking hips right now? Why is this one back here? Why is that one?
Yeah, I've seen you do that to your clients, and they all love it.
Oh, they love it all the time. Let me tell you.
John, can we do 45 more minutes of just this?
Right.
Okay. So let's continue on, and she's going to go into chaturanga.
Chata.
I used to have this one student in one of my classes who every time I would say lower down into chaturanga, every time she would go chimichanga, every time. And she would just, I never said anything to her about it because it didn't annoy me and it didn't seem to annoy anyone else. So and it was always a whisper, chimichanga. All right. So she's going to go down into chaturanga. Now, right there, those heels pitch forward. And you can see here how that makes the abdominal activation collapse.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me make a face, but I saw that back just kind of sway back all of a sudden and go, ooh.
Yeah, and now we can see one hip higher than the other, right? Yeah. Well, and that is also that she's lowering down, but the camera hasn't really changed positions. But you can definitely see that she's lost that pelvic abdominal activation. Now, I haven't seen this video, but with the forward tilt of her shoulders, my guess is that with the forward tilt of the shoulders, my guess as to what's going to happen is that these shoulders are going to end in the pose lower than her elbows, which is not what you want if you're going to be doing any kind of a push-up.
Well, I also feel kind of like her scap might be winging a bit.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so what that means for the layman, right, is that the shoulder blade is kind of popping off. And so you'll see this a lot of times. I feel like you see this a lot of times in like skinny, nerdy boys. over generalizing. But I grew up with several friends who were lankier and skinny and played a lot of video games. And they always have like this. I mean, my right shoulder blade wings slightly. But you get sometimes you'll see these kids that you can almost get like your entire hand behind their scapula as if you were to like to peel it off, so to speak. Like it just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it comes from poor, what do they call it? Shoulder rhythm, if you will. But the sliding of the scapula or your shoulder blades scooping around your rib cage and not having proper muscle control. And to your point, right? An over devotion maybe to pec minor or other anterior muscles that don't allow us to access that serratus anterior properly and those other muscle groups help, so to speak, suck those shoulder blades flat to the ribs to help keep our humerus head, your funny bone, in the socket.
Yeah, right. So let's see if our hypothesis.
Your hypothesis is correct. Yep, there it goes.
Oh, okay. Wait, actually, that was not
terrible though.
That was not as profound as I was thinking that it was going to be. So let's slow that down just a bit. Now she's going to dive into that, and yeah. So this is not something I would say is completely. I
was actually. It'd been nice, I guess, for her to have not quite have gone maybe another inch or two, so to speak. Stopping right about there, I would say, would be excellent.
About there, yeah. And it goes down a little lower, but there are two things to call in mind for that. It goes down a little lower, and she does not spend much time in it. Right.
And the thing I also like about this too is her elbow positioning over the wrist.
Yes.
A lot of times that we won't see that in any type of push-up effort. I know she's not necessarily doing a push-up, but she's doing a push-up. Right? I mean, a rose by any other name.
Right.
And so
something that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just rambling. So that was it though. It's just a lot of times you'll see is the hands are either too far forward, the elbows flare out, or again that we move our hands in front of our. I guess you can't see me do any of this. Right. Instead of it being down here, so to speak, a lot of times people bring their hands up into their shoulders or they'll rotate out is the common things we'll see in these things.
Yeah. Now, something I want to call to mind here is that she did not spend much time in this pose, which is fine. If she were to have kept those heels over the toes, then that would have enabled her to not lose that activation in the pelvic abdominals and then to keep that effort out of her low back.
Mm-hmm.
The shoulders being higher than the hips means that there's that loss of activation. Had she kept the heels moving back, then what would have occurred is that she wouldn't have, by just mechanics, she would not have been able to go down as low because everything would have just stopped in its maximally expressed range of motion. But it's not terrible. Like I said, she didn't spend a real long time here, and it's not.
It's not so much we're crapping on her or saying that what she's doing wrong is detrimental, but I think for the layman or for anyone who's watching this and trying to either enhance their yoga practice or just take some tips, because again, maybe you just want to learn how to do better push-ups. If you're doing push-ups, again, you're going to want to have those toes more forward under the heels. You're going to want those same positions set up so that you are engaging your core. Because again, how many times have we seen just kind of dog shit push-ups where people are dropping their hips like they're trying to hump the ground like a 13-year-old for the first time, right? Like,
and I do want to call to mind again that this person has an extraordinary presentation of strength.
Absolutely.
Has obviously been doing this for a long time. A lot of fluidity and a lot of demonstrable balance. So no shade to this creator at all. This is a very traditionally expressed and very strong.
I mean, to me, it's like a 9 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10 out of anything that, I mean, again, everything we're calling out on her is, again, very nitpicky. And again, the reason why I want to just highlight that is 80% of the people that watch this and try to demonstrate this or replicate this will not be anywhere near any of this. She's doing an excellent job of making this look easy and approachable.
Yeah. Very, very fluid with it.
And so for a lot of
it's
people, they'll need to your point, like if she was back in that high plank, you go only so deep as one that you're able to maintain the foot position, maintain the elbow over the wrist position, but then maintain that stretch across the chest and that tension in the core. And this is where things like yoga are really going to be beneficial, I think, for anybody who is either rehabbing or is trying to maybe start out and just kind of unsure of things, or just, or again, wanting to put their toes in the water gently. Because any movement that you are new and practicing, you have to go slow with. You ought to go slow with, so that way you can learn the move, feel the things turning on, notice when things turning off. To that practitioner we were watching, as Paul was highlighting, when her body kind of shifted forward, she let loose of the abdominals for a second and created that slight sway back to the bottom of that chaturanga. Is it the end of the world for that practitioner? No. Is it a place that she could benefit to improve on? Absolutely. Right? Because we saw that highlighted in a couple of different areas with the lunge and then the forward bends, right? That same kind of slouch element was kind of present to some degree. And so again, go ahead.
So this person, this video is 10 years old.
So she's over 35.
Right now. This is an instructional yoga video suitable for people with a regular yoga practice. Right? But bunch of kudos to this person. Something else I want to call to mind here, right? So my suggested videos are, here's more yoga, and here's some comedy. Here's something with like indie music, talking about different kinds of meditation, a little bit of stuff with politics, whatever, right? The algorithm leads you to the things that you that you express interest in. Then up here, there's a sponsored thing. They know my gender, they know my age, and so
Got the blue chews.
No. Hi there. I'm Olha, 54 years old. You don't mind getting acquainted with a woman of such godlike beauty, do you? Sponsored ad. Sponsored ad, right?
Can dream. We can dream.
Right. Thank you, Olha. But no, I'm good. I appreciate it. Anyway, so look, again, this woman has 300,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel. Very strong, very accomplished, and does a good job with even says begin with a warm-up and then start this video. Even says always work within a pain-free range.
Yep.
Right? Now, that's great advice and a great demonstration. Only talking about here, and not we started off saying yoga fails. There's no fail in this at all, right? There's only talking about like what someone who's experienced can do versus what someone who's inexperienced should do, and the reasons for why they should do what they should do. If you have any questions about anything that we covered here today, we're gonna start talking about this for our next couple of these kinds of things for our next couple of videos, because we want to take this this traditional kind of approach to things and talk about, like we did today, the different ways that you can also incorporate the same kinds of movements into maybe a weight training aspect or some other kind of movement-based program, but also to say that there is a modern way to understand why you are doing the poses that you're doing, or how you can modify the poses that you're doing to become the most beneficial. If you have any questions about anything that we covered today, please feel free to reach out.
I was gonna say, and then we'll keep that cooking on Tuesdays, and then if you're looking for something else on Thursday mornings, I go through not gym fails, but form checks on Reddit. And so I'll try to give a probably 30-40 minute review of somebody's squat or deadlift or whatever I come across on. And then I'll even try to put in some comments and notes for them. So if you are looking for some of that, feel free to, maybe you can hop in on Reddit. And if you have a Reddit, maybe you'll get selected, so to speak, if you're the lucky few. But we'll get about 3 or 4. I'm sorry?
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a comment,
Whisper and
or
DM.
a message, or check us out on our website, rangefitnessonline.com.
All right. Sir Paul,
Sir
stay
John,
mindful as fuck.
and don't compensate. We'll see everybody next time.
Take care, Sir Paul. Have a good
Take it
one.
easy. All right, you too, man.